Hey there YouTube, my name's James and I'm here because I need an outlet to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. Pretty much anything needs to go up my chest for a bit. So I thought I'd take a little bit of time tonight and go through a few different questions in a D&D group that I'm in. Give a few of the different answers and thoughts and opinions, and hopefully this advice can be useful to somebody out there. So the first one that really drew my attention here is, I was wondering what you all think about standing instead of sitting as a DM. And I'll be honest, I do this pretty much every session. For a year and a half, maybe 2 years there, I was playing almost exclusively at a local game store in and around the Adventurers League. I tended to run a lot of homebrew and demo other game systems, as I like to branch out and explore different things beyond Dungeons & Dragons. But just due to the limitations of the space, it became very difficult for players on the other side of a table to really hear me. And if we had to put a few tables together and try and get your voice to carry 3-4 people down, it's almost impossible in a large crowded game store. So I got into the habit of basically running those situations as 2 or 3 little subgroups. The parties would be free to split up or come together and do their own thing. And I would basically be standing the entire time, walking slowly around the table. And at first, this was pretty annoying. My feet would hurt, legs were sore, I'd have to walk home from the game store afterwards, and it was just hell for a bit. But after a while, I came to really enjoy it. I found that having the capacity to just reach out and put your hand on the shoulder of a player on the other side of the table when you want it in, give a certain inflection or reinforce a point as you're narrating a certain line for an NPC. Being able to get in close and whisper to see if somebody wants to do something. I got to use possessed items much more frequently and easily. I got to facilitate little nudges and to make sure that I was really getting around to all the different players. It was almost impossible for one player to have my attention almost exclusively to the others. And it also created situations where half the table might not know exactly what the other half was doing if they were in a different area. And what this actually did was it basically killed all of the metagaming at the time. We had half of a total party wipe because of the actions of a single player. This was in a Star Wars Edge of the Empire game last year, I believe. And the other side of the table hadn't realised at the start that he had left half of his party to die on an Imperial station, taking the only fighter out, leaving them engaged in a long, protracted firefight. The situation that directly followed this was fascinating, because he then had to explain to the other players, in character, what he had done. He couldn't just palm it off a hand wave of, yep, you know, and it's my Sark secret, but you can't say anything. They would ask in question, or they would ask in character, like, what's going on? And he would have to give them a nice fleshed out response of, look, I had to do this, I had to leave him behind. He wasn't as remorseful as I'm making it out to be. It was a bit of a dick situation in all honesty. But I'm just saying that the idea of standing is something that a lot of us don't picture or envision when we get to Dungeons & Dragons, but has honestly been a big hit for my gaming and something that I do at home games, quieter spaces, friends' houses, all of that now. It's just become kind of second habit, and I almost can't stand still. I almost can't sit still in my seat when I'd rather be gesticulating with my entire body, as body language can really bring a bit more character to your world. And it seems like a lot of folks are quite happy with that for it. So let's have a look at this next one for it. And alright, so without having to read out the entire thing, this can basically be summed up as this player is concerned that this Dungeon Master is concerned that his party has become too powerful. That he's got 5 of them at 10th level, and they're basically nuking everything he throws at them. They're able to kill a villain in a single round effectively, and that he's finding it difficult to challenge them. Now, I think there's a few different ways we can approach this, and I will put the prefix in that unfortunately the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons monsters aren't too well balanced. There are creatures really high challenge rating that can be easily push through. There are some creatures at low level that just stand out head and shoulders above the rest equivalently. There's a few different issues in that regard, so I'll try to approach this more from I try to approach all of my advice, regardless of the game, to try to fit it to more of a inter-game advice. I like to think that you have a fairly consistent philosophy in regards to these things. You're going to develop your own kind of style, but you're also going to provide a very accurate depiction of what experience playing with you is going to be like, which can be important as players will move around and try different games a lot more these days than they did when I first got into these things. So when it comes to straight numbers challenges, honestly, I don't think this is a big issue. Players play for years and years. They will be in and out of game for months. They will invest time into these characters, leveling them up, learning the ins and outs. And at some point, they do have to feel rewarded, and they do have to have these short periods where they feel like they've stepped up in the world and they've taken on higher responsibility and authority. It's a really good feeling the first time you can run into an orc encampment, and you know, realistically, they can't defeat you anymore. Whereas previously, you might have had to flee if evenly matched with one outnumbered. When it comes to wanting to do a challenge, however, and I do believe that challenge is very important when it comes to a good tabletop role-playing game, I think that game in general needs to have a certain degree of difficulty to it, so that the rewards feel extra rewarding, and that, how do I say, something given freely has no meaning. So with that in mind, so I just lost my spot for a second. So with that in mind, the Dungeon Master can change any numbers on their side of the screen and can match any foe to a party's capabilities. There is never a reason to use things directly out of the book as is. A Dungeon Master should be free to change up the combat by changing all the numbers. Now, a lot of newer players, a lot of newer Dungeon Masters, and even myself when I was younger and first getting into this, to learn the systems back and forth, I did all the math. I would work through the 3rd edition and then the 3.5 Monster Manuals and Dungeon Master's Guide, working out exactly what the different values of the hit dice, all the different health, rolling up individually as opposed to using averages, adding on class levels, taking extra spells, referencing that to existing monsters of similar challenge rating and ability, and weighing if I was being too generous or too stingy. And the end result is that after a while you start to develop more of a good sense, kind of feel. Numbers will start to feel right. You'll think, alright, this guy's got a +5 attack bonus, he's looking at monsters that have a 20 AC, he's going to hit roughly a fourth of the time, which isn't going to feel super good for him if he's low level and he doesn't have multiple attacks. And you can kind of tweak on the fly. Well, if I take it down to an 18, it's still somewhat challenging, but it's getting easier there. You could take it down to a 16, and he's got about even chances, 15 being the perfect balance, but I tend to move in the whole numbers and modify things up and down by 2 as needed, as I find that putting it into a lot of odd numbers, and I'll get myself a little more confused. I try to have it as just one or the other, and so I'm remembering less numbers overall. When it does come to these kinds of things though, a final thought on challenging high-level players and their characters is primarily, after the first few levels, I moved to maybe more of a social game. The dungeons are less frequent, the battles tend to be large, more set pieces, using up the entirety of a map and taking an hour or 2. I very rarely do the traditional dungeon crawl when the party is level to a point where they have abilities which consistently override the need for that, where you don't have to worry about overland travel anymore because you have access to teleport, or infinite food and resources, or moving faster than the standard overland travels, when you don't have to worry about getting past locked doors because you have magic or magical items which can move through these, stealthing past whole encounters. I tend to put more of a hand wave narrative approach to the every band of kobolds or orcs or goblins that your party's coming across, and save the actual tactical combat grid and miniatures for the larger set pieces with a dozen or more foes. That's going to take rounds upon rounds and have shifting terrain and elements coming in and out, and focus my attentions more on the party's impact on the world, the way that characters are progressing their own personal stories, what goals they have. And I'm a big proponent of players always creating goals for their character and being more proactive in their what's the word? Crap. Yeah, crap. I like players to be more proactive in their crap. I like them to engage in the game world and with the stories of the other characters. I very rarely run any content directly out of a book these days, as I prefer to have a story based around the input and continued input of my players, my friends. Because my players at the end of the day are going to be my friends, and I'm going to have more fun creating a story with them as opposed to running a story from a book for them. And I would say that can... pretty long-winded, but that's a pretty well-rounded answer to that, I would hope. And hopefully I've given you some thoughts in that regard. I've used Musings and Masterminds for running superhero games before. I've tried D20 Modern and Big Eye Small Mouth, which I think was D20 as well. I'm going back like 15 years, so... and I don't necessarily want to look it up again. Genesis is a great system, but I don't know if it specifically will work for superheroes. Honestly, I don't know of any really good superhero RPGs out at the moment, and that to me is very disappointing considering the huge rise of superhero films, comics, video games, just media in general over these last 10 years or so. This last decade has been huge in regards to the superhero fad, and we don't seem to have seen that coming across into tabletop, which I find pretty confusing. I mean, outside of the licensed DC and Marvel stuff. No, I haven't run City of the Spider Queen on 3.5, but I have read through City of the Spider Queen and pretty much most of the third ed modules and manuals. It was early 3rd edition where I really got into the game properly and discovered what it was. Before that, it was kind of in my periphery, something that like aunts and uncles and cousins and whatnot would play sometimes. But being introduced properly with the 3rd edition handbook, and then 3.5 when I was finally able to afford my own player's handbook and expand from there, I inhaled the content, and geez, Wizards pushed out content constantly between the blogs and the forums. To the question specifically though, to take it away from 3.5 to take it away from this, brief explanation is Epic Levels is a variant of play where you take your characters beyond 20th level, you use a formula to generate new leveling paths, and basically you can level forever. It is fun, but at the same time, it can be notoriously difficult to balance, particularly in the 3rd edition rule set. A lot of D20s do have balance issues, particularly in the higher levels where your modifiers are going to climb into the 50s or 60s. It's not unheard of to have characters under level 20 get modifiers over 100. And when you're rolling dice and adding these numbers to them, it slows down play significantly. That said, basically this is a question of how do I run a low-level module for high-level characters, and can you simply use them as is because I only have 2 players? And this unfortunately it wouldn't quite work, because mathematically you need to have the encounters designed to challenge players or characters of the existing level, your target level. Now, in a 2-player game, I would probably have a few NPCs in play, or even have the players themselves running 1 or 2 NPCs on the side, just to bulk out and give them more tactical options. There are only some things which 2 people can do that a party can't, and unfortunately those things tend to be more of the social encounters, the espionage, and those kinds of things, unfortunately, I wouldn't have a lot in the way of pre-written modules for. You could basically run the adventure as is, but you would have to redo all of the math. And that's my advice for taking modules and re-leveling them. I'm a big proponent of re-leveling them. That's cool. I don't have easy access to a printer, but I'm not in a school or an office, so that happens. I'm not going to delve into the economy, as the economy tends to vary from game to game pretty significantly. Alright. Pets. Have any of you guys ever had to adopt a pet in-game? Because I've definitely got into the habit of it when I was a player, and I haven't played for a long time, unfortunately. I've been a Dungeon Master for almost the entire time since I started, outside the occasional one-shots or trying something out. What I have noticed is that almost every group that I've had will try to adopt either a creature or a small-sized enemy minion, which tends to be a goblin at first, and then kobolds after I started using kobolds more when I fell in love with the race. I have almost unanimously encouraged this. The creature will tend to be a narrative element more so than a mechanical one. They're really going to engage in combat. They're probably going to be hiding off to the side in the bushes. If it's going to make for an interesting little scene or story, they might come in at the last second to save someone if I need to by simply jumping on them from the side with a little knife, and they're going to have no chance of winning, but bless their little heart, they're trying, and the party's all going to come back re-moraled, restored. And you'll notice that I'm not in that situation, I'm not using them with mechanics involved. So I'm not worrying if they're going to go into a poison gas room, unless it's going to make sense from a story perspective of, okay, do I want to have them to and ah? Is this the only way through? Do they have to go through the poison gas chamber? Or can they go through another room? And when they have that option, I think having the little NPC there, which they have to take into consideration, adds an extra depth to it. It adds that one little wrench and takes it from a left or right decision to a left, right, oh, but maybe left, oh, but maybe right. And I don't require the players to narrate their actions, but I encourage it. I've never forced a player to feed Slug the Goblin and starve them as punishment if they didn't, but I've rewarded every opportunity when players have gone and purchased from their own funds a little top hat and vest for, well, a bald cap and a vest for Slug, and I try to get him into more of a waiter or driver kind of role as more support in the overall cast. Generally, I'd say just keep it simple. I mean, fall back on the story because the story is going to trump your rule set anyway. Maps are too of a topic to really cover here, and that would honestly be deserving of not just one video but a whole series of videos. And I don't know if I'm quite necessarily up to that. This is more just for some fun and to see what comes of it. I just like to get my thoughts out there and have some way to express some of these opinions and ideas, concepts. It can be difficult because I'm quite shy, and I don't take part in a lot of these conversations, but I almost always have a thought or a suggestion, and I'll oftentimes take some of these thoughts and suggestions and then jump into a private conversation and chat with some friends about stuff. But honestly, I can't be annoying the same 3 or 4 people year in, year out, or I'm just not going to have any friends anymore. That said, if you're ever unsure, don't provide a map. Medieval societies, most historical cultures, even in fantasy film and literature, the world is not viewed from space. We are outside the game and we can see how it looks, but we as Dungeon Masters have to remember that our players are linked more to their characters than to outside of the screen. And more recently, I've been really enjoying the idea, and I've started to put it into practice. I'm still experimenting with simply never showing the players a map, or only giving them bad or wrong maps. Sometimes even intentionally false information that a foe or rival might be planting into them. I'm finding that the players are a lot more tentative when they're stepping out into the wilds when this happens, but they are having a lot of fun exploring the world, as opposed to me giving them a sheet of paper with a few highlights that they can quick travel between. I've been very much falling in love with the idea of hex crawl recently. This would be a topic all on its own. This is basically the X cards and the consent survey, and I do have a lot of thoughts on this, but I've, for the most part, kept them to myself or to very privately with a few friends, as we've discussed the backs and forths with it. In general, I would sum my thoughts up as succinctly as possible that either way, these things are going to be taking you out of the game experience, and that it's going to unfortunately be a little more grey as you learn about your friends, the people that you're playing games with in and out for months on end. I think that this kind of thing has only come under the spotlight and been able to gain traction as we've seen a rise in pickup games via game stores, leagues, conventions, and whatnot. This is talking about very specific items and not too big a deal. Paid DMs are an interesting topic, and I would say that I am pro, but I wouldn't personally pay for one. I would be open to being paid, honestly, but I would want it to be a very professional service where I would be showing up with the tiles, painted miniatures for everything. I've got the math down packed, I've got the scripts ready, I've got the handouts going, I've got my little accessories and props, and that I'm happy to show up, set up, clean up, and be gone. Kind of treat it as that one little complete package. I don't know. I've always been the DM, and I've always gone above and beyond, at least as far as I've been aware. I'd have to go into this in a little more detail. The 5th ed monster math is a little bit up and down, unfortunately. But I do believe it is possible, and I do use solo and boss creatures in 4th edition quite often. Okay, now this one actually confused me a bit, but it did catch my eye because it's got really nice art. This gentleman would like to form a kind of hybrid between World of Darkness and Dungeons and Dragons, and he's got no clue how to go about running a session. Now, this I think is actually going to be more advice on how you pitch the game to yourself, how you define what you're after very specifically, so that you can then hone in on these points, have your solid foundation. You need to have a skeleton in place. So in this regard, Cody hasn't said what it is about World of Darkness and what it is about Dungeons and Dragons that he would like to bring together. He hasn't spoken about if he wants to use the D&D rule set, but use it in the world of World of Darkness, or simply take aspects of that world. Does he want Dungeons and Dragons, but with a slight horror theme, as a lot of people would consider Curse of Strahd to be your entry level into that aspect of play. If he wants more of a horror game, but in a fantasy feel, I would have a great deal of suggestions for other games that you could try. I don't personally think Dungeons and Dragons works very well in regards to horror, and this is largely going to come down to the inflated health pools. And what you'll notice is a lot of the good horror games will have more stats, so you can see how you're getting injured in very specific, minute ways, but you don't have a large pool of health, and so every encounter has a tense feeling of this could be the last. Every time a foe swings at you, you've got to consider this could be your 1 or 2 hits away from death, and that tension puts everyone on edge, which helps to drive that horror feeling. This is a very confusing question. Mage hand is mage hand. I believe if you play the smallest characters and shrink yourself, you can just carry yourself with mage hand and get flight, and that, I think, technically bypasses the flight restrictions in Adventurers League. Alright, music and games. Yes and no. I honestly am a big proponent of music and games. I think that anything you can do to help set the atmosphere is wonderful, and I love playing with candles and very minimalistic rules, books, reading minis and such, and that almost all dark feel. I've played outdoors and been like sleeping in the backyard in tents and stuff as a kid. I would love to go camping properly and play around like a fire and that kind of thing out in the wilds. And I've got a few friends that do reenactment stuff. So honestly, I should really try and get something like that together. I think that'd be the kind of thing that'd be really fun to show off and be kind of special to everyone's there. Back to film music itself. I think music is a great thing. I haven't been able to use it myself for a long while, as I've mostly been playing at local stores and other people's houses, and I don't have a little portable speaker box. I don't actually have a glass speaker set up in the room that I game in at the moment. That's in the bedroom. Now, your music selection is going to be far more important, and you need to remember that this is an ambient volume, and so that your music should never distract. Okay, you're using this to set the scene, to drive almost on a subconscious level that feeling of fantasy and exploration and tense drama. And so you need to select things that nobody knows. More specifically, some people might know them, but you can't use popular things. And I would say I never use anything with lyrics. The closest I would get is maybe a little bit of chanting, or kind of echoey, but you can't make out actual words, or at least in the language that you're using. I wouldn't even use other languages, as I'm trying to take away from that voice. When someone hears a voice, they're going to instantly start to listen to that, and that means they're going to stop listening to you, they're not going to stop listening to the other players, they're distracted. And we don't want to create a situation like that, we want to kind of avoid it. We want to enhance, not subtract. And so I would look at ambient mixes, and I would look at the soundtracks of games and film. I would stay away from main themes, and I would stay away from the biggest and most popular. Examples here that we can see, I would not use anything by Hans Zimmer, because this is specifically a very fast composer. Hans Zimmer is wonderful with his soundtracks. He stands out in every film that he does. You'll recognize him with the very strong bass in all of the recent Batman films, the Pirates of the Caribbean films, the Sherlock Holmes films, and he tends to have one or two main themes throughout a film, which he will then draw out and place in and out of his other songs as it's the theme. Using that kind of thing, first up, it's going to be really fast, and so it's going to really contrast and prevent you from creating slow breathing moments. You need to have an ebb and a flow in the game. You need to have fast situations, and you need to have slow situations where players can collect themselves, think for a moment, speak amongst themselves for a little, or consider their next action. You can't do that with a chase scene going on in the background as far as the music is concerned. Pill of Eternity, I would say yes, because whilst it's not niche, it is tiny compared to Skyrim. I would not use anything from Skyrim, or if I did, I would probably go for the older Elder Scrolls games, Morrowind and beyond, and earlier. I quite like The Witcher, but none of the combat music, mostly just the ambient mixes. And I really like older stuff like Baldur's Gate's not bad. Ice and Dales is pretty good. I find it's a little more ambient and less theme-based. Some of the World of Warcraft stuff for the zone-specific things are pretty good, but they do have very iconic songs for, say, the cities and the opening menus and whatnot. You're going to go for Eastern stuff, Break the Default and whatnot. Honestly pretty good. I would stay away from Final Fantasy because it's so iconic, and I wouldn't really use anything from Smash Bros. As anything for fighting games are made to be really pounding and upbeat. And we want to have more of an ambient background element as when we're trying to pump things up. It can be very difficult to just reach for a remote and change the song. You've got to do a lot of pre-planning to create mixes like that and to use music at that degree. So I prefer to err on the side of keeping it slow, keeping it chill, and then building using body language, tone, language, voice, my own volume, trying to hype the players up in other ways. How do you set a challenging encounter without appearing to be a TPK intentionally? Roll in front of the Dungeon Master screen, and if a character isn't present for the fight, have that player control some of the monsters. No, I'm serious. Two interesting things that I've tried over the last year or two after looking at other advice of people on YouTube and trying that myself, is that, that's the way to explain. Players have a lot less pity for each other than I do for them. So if you have one player come in and take control of a few monsters, either having more of an assistant role if they're trying out dungeon mastering themselves, or simply if the party is split or one person's not taking part in the combat, give them some monsters. Give them the stats, have them run, and you're going to find that they do not pull punches like you would. They're very much the, hey, I'm controlling this monster, I'm going to get this group and I'm going to bloody their nose, and I'm going to try and kill one of them because this is pretty fun. And the second half is a roll in front of the screen. Simply taking away your ability to change the dice removes any thought in the players' heads that they're playing against you, as opposed, and this might be unfair, as opposed to they're playing against the game. When you roll in front of the screen, when you roll with random elements, and you can include the players in this, when you reveal a little bit of what's going on behind the screen in this regard. But what you're doing is you're creating more of a collaborative experience. It's no longer the players versus the Dungeon Master. It is instead the players with the Dungeon Master are trying to beat the game. If you can combine these, it's particularly good. No one's going to ever blame you if someone dies and the dice was rolled in the open, let alone if someone else was rolling that dice for you. That said, you're going to remove any ability you have to modify numbers behind a screen as you might. Now, a lot of us will use this to save the players because we don't want people to die in. You don't want someone to die to like the 40th kobold on your way to fight the Lich's stronghold. You want to kind of save it for the big encounters that people are going to find memorable. But if you take away that element of being able to save them, you're going to find that the game can be pretty difficult and pretty lethal. I'm actually working on a bunch of these with some friends at the moment. We're doing a kind of group collaborative West Marches game, which is going to be pretty confusing, as we're 3 DMs with 3 systems and 3 worlds, but a shared hub of players. So maybe I'll let you know how that goes. I'm looking forward to it, but I'm a bit anxious. But what we're doing for that in the West Marches style is very random encounter based. It's very much rolling for exploration, moving your way through large hex grids, and exploring the world on like a week by week basis. And so we're all creating our own little random encounter tables. And what I've been doing is I've been taking the D12 method, just because you don't see D12s used for a lot of things, and you make it so your 11s and your 12s are encounters. I treat an 11 as a lesser and a 12 as a greater. And what I do is I have the players each roll this, so they each get a chance. And if you get a group of 5 players, yeah, you're going to have an encounter, on average. If you got 4, you're slightly under average to get an encounter. So you got a little more security in that regard. Then what I do is I'll have a chart for the D12 again, of the lesser encounters and the larger encounters. And what I do is I have basically the first 5 will be a point of interest. So something you've discovered that it is an encounter, but it isn't specifically a combat. It's not going to be monsters or a creature, but it could be a lair or a base or someone who's not hostile yet. Stuff like that. My 6 through my 10 will become a monster or creature or encounter. It could be bandits, zombies, or wyvern attacking. Doesn't necessarily happen immediately. I like to have the creatures kind of stalk behind the party for a convenient opportunity, so it might be later on when the group's resting that they'll get pounced on, or when someone's straggled behind or gone off to ping the bushes. Then the 11s and the 12s will be roll for 1 of each and roll on the high chart respectively, and then that's just repeated for more powerful locations and points of interest and more dangerous monsters and creatures. And I got that partially from Matt Colville, using the D12s, but I used the format of charts and subcharts from Rogue Trader, the Fantasy Flight role-playing games. Specific rule questions, not too big of a deal. I try to keep everything I can into a simple backpack, but I do prefer to run at home because I have bookcases of stuff and shelves on shelves of models, and I like to have access to that, as well as the props. I have to plan a lot more if I run something outside of the home, just because I need to know exactly what I need to bring. Anyhow, that's my music mix done for the night, and that means I've been talking for maybe close to an hour, I'm not sure specifically. So I'm going to leave this as is, and hopefully this has been some kind of useful advice for you and your games. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff if you're interested in seeing anything more. If you have any thoughts on these questions, points of advice, or anything that I've said, feel free to ask away in the comments. And most importantly, if you want to see content like this in the future, let me know. I mean, I thrive on feedback, and I like to help out and give people advice and help like this. Anyway, you guys all take care.